I have a grinder reminder here. In boot camp, you always wore your hat. And since I was in the Navy, we had the sailor hat, the white, whatever you call it. Anyway, so you always wore that outside, and so you had a very specific way of putting it on, so that it was always the same, and it looked the same as the guy next to you. So when you finally got to go off base on Liberty, now we still had to wear a uniform. Anyway, at some point you got to take your uniform off and wear regular street clothes, and you had this permanent line from the sunburn, or San Diego, a lot of it was sunburn. Eventually it started to tan, but it was just constant. You know, that line was a perfect straight line, and so you took your hat off and everybody laughed at you because you had your, well, the area that we practiced marching on in formation was a big asphalt, kind of a parking lot, but they never let cars out there. It was just for marching. And so that was called a grinder. You know, that would grind you into shape or something like that. So anyway, my bandana for my little road trip, that's where that was. Breakfast. I was going to leave this in the freezer for a while and cool it off, but I was like, see, it would be good ice cold, but it's also good now. Probably be better ice cold, but whatever. Oh, okay, so, yeah, afternoon already. I managed to sleep pretty much straight through until about 11:30 I woke up. So I was like, yeah, that's a good time to think about getting up, just, you know. And I couldn't find the clock. You know, I'm like, oh crap, what time is it, you know? But anyway, I was hoping it wouldn't be like, you know, 8 o'clock at night or something like that, which would have felt really good, but not so good at the same time. Alright. I'm starting to save plastic again. One of the people I'm supporting on Patreon is, I think his name is Dave, I don't remember. Anyway, this guy started a do-it-yourself home and small business plastic recycling program, and he open sourced the whole thing. So he's spent some time inventing and refining some machines, and the idea is you can, first you have to identify what kind of plastic you have, and each type of plastic has different characteristics. But once you've identified and sorted it, then you can grind it up into little chips, basically. I'm not the expert on it. I've just been watching it and trying to learn. But you grind it up, and then you can melt it. And each plastic has a specific safe melting temperature, where if you can stay below that critical temperature, it won't burn. It'll just liquefy or turn into a, you know, basically a liquid. And so he shows how to use electronic temperature controls to actually dial in the exact temperature you want, which is pretty cool. With, you know, obviously electric heaters and stuff like that. So it seems to me that a high density polyethylene, HDPE, I think that's what it is. It's a number 2 recycle symbol for a plastic. So there's a lot of things that are that HDPE. I think that's what it is. Anyway, it's a number 2. Oil containers, for instance, are number two. Some plastic packaging is number two. I think the Coke bottle was a number one or something like that. They all have different characteristics, but so one of my projects that I think I'd like to do sometime, and I'm not going to necessarily save the world, but it would be kind of a fun side business to start up or something like that, would be go around to oil change places or garages or something like that and see if they would see if they would save their plastics for me, the jugs, and then recycle them into making, perhaps funnels, that they could then sell. Because obviously, if you can't make a profit, it's not much of a business, unless you're just independently wealthy that you can afford to spend the time and the money. It's not really worth doing. Now, I don't know if I could do it on a scale that I could make money, which is obviously the idea. Or you could do it kind of like Johnny Appleseed kind of a process, where you get a few people interested and involved, help them or make the machines, and then give it to them at cost or a small profit, and show them that they can do something with what they got instead of throwing it away. Because a lot of businesses, they're paying to throw trash away, right? You have to rent your dumpster and then they come and empty it. Well, if you've ever noticed, when an oil container, like a 1 quart oil container, when it's empty, it's mostly air and it's a fairly thin plastic. But even if you crush it down, it doesn't get much smaller. Well, if you could use the grinder to take it down into chips, it becomes very small. Okay. Well, if you went the next step and then learned how to make a product out of those chips, then you'd look kind of good to your customers, because you're like, I'm not throwing these plastic things away, I'm recycling them. Would you like to have a funnel? Right? It would almost make sense for a place that generated a huge amount of plastic to give away something like a funnel with their logo embossed on it, rather than having to pay to get rid of something. They'd have to pay a little bit to run the machine, but the cost of the electricity might be less than the cost of emptying that dumpster all the time. Just a thought, but I kind of do like the Johnny Appleseed analogy, though, because this guy, according to the story, who knows if it's even true, but he had a backpack full of apple seeds, and he wandered the West and gave apple seeds to people on farms and said, here, plant a few trees, and then when the apples grow, replant those seeds, and then eventually you'll have some apples. And I'm like, that's just fun, because you got people out there that didn't have apples, and then now there's places that they can grow apples. Is it even true? I don't know. I've never really thought to research it to see, but the story, it's common enough. Maybe it is true. It's just, you're picturing it like, how on earth did this guy have, how far could you walk, and how many apple seeds could you possibly carry? He must not have given each person very many, He just had to give them the right information on how to plant them in the first place. But if you only gave somebody 10 apple seeds and they screwed it up, well, I guess that's their problem, but I don't know. Anyhow. Huh. I just had an idea. These are always scary. Star Trek. Their main computer displays, most of them were just a colored looking graph with something on it. You didn't very often see something that was actually like an information display or something like that. It didn't have numbers reading out. Usually it was just like, it was a touch panel supposedly that had, you know, nice obvious blue and red colors and stuff like that, and different patterns, and then you'd click on it, and then I don't think they ever really showed something happening. You just, you know, you hit something, you know, and then somewhere else in the spaceship something happened. Okay. Well, I happened to see a behind the scenes video one time, and if they needed to change the display, they just flipped the top up, and they had different color transparency film, and they just cut a new pattern and stick it over the template, and then that display had a different color on it. Well, they did the whole thing behind the scenes, and then the camera would maybe have a shot of it one way, and then they'd cut to something else, and then they'd come back, and then, oh, it's condition red. Well, then they had the red shot, you know. But they just would go back and forth and just flip it up, and because, you know, I assume that, well, when they shot most of the Star Treks, flat panel displays didn't even exist yet. I mean, the original Star Trek, obviously. But even Next Generation, I don't think flat panels were around yet. So CRTs didn't look right, you know, and it was hard for them to film something off a CRT and not make it look like a CRT, I guess. So they did it this way, and it, you know, looked very futuristic, you know, until you realize how they did it. Well, I was just looking at this picture here. I don't know if this will show up right or not. Yeah, that's good enough. You know, so just the shot of a not even finished cockpit there. Okay. So I'm looking at that, and you know, the guy that drew this had a series of smaller displays, all in a, well, there's 2 or 3 different planes at their end, but you know, they're kind of spread around, and then the other ones were windows. Well, I was thinking I could take something like a 30 or 40 inch flat panel TV and then create bezels that were smaller, right? And then have your switches and stuff built onto a panel, and so you have your switches, you know, in little arrays, and then your bezels for your customized display. Well, you could put that whole thing on top of a flat panel TV, and so you'd have one TV that looked like it had 6 or 7 different displays on it, and then it would just be a simple matter of creating a series of pictures or a video file that had images in the right spot, and they would come through. And then you could even have changing backlight coming off of the other parts of the display that would backlight all your switches. I'm like, that's kind of cool, you know, because then you could just drop a simple, I mean, now, yeah, it's a little bit overkill, but if I, instead of having to have, because, you know, my earlier ideas, if I had 5 or 6 tablets, you know, these were, you can get these for about $100 a piece now or less, so they're not very expensive. But you can get a 24-inch flat panel smart TV for like $150 for 24 inches. Right? And what's kind of cool about the smart TV is it's got Ethernet interface, it's got, you can read off a USB stick. That would be simple enough. So you could actually probably have a switch on your switch panel that would change the order of the pictures or advance to the next picture. And so every time you hit the button, it would change color, or it would do something else, or you'd say, you know, I want to show me a navigation display, and you hit a button, and then it would just change to that picture, and then you'd have a navigation display. It's like, okay, that's actually, you know, pretty simple. Because I'd always thought, yeah, you could build something around a full display and then put switches around it, but I hadn't figured out a way to make it economical to make little displays. Because in a spaceship cockpit, you'd have a lot of switches, but you wouldn't have this monster 24-inch screen necessarily. It would be too big. Anyway, talked about nothing for another half an hour. That's good. Let's see. I'm probably going to try to get the bike off the truck today, but my feet hurt still, so that'll be interesting. Hopefully I don't do any more damage to myself or the bike. I was hoping that by the time I needed to unload it, I'd have a nice convenient spot to do it, but I haven't figured one out yet. 12:30. I guess if I'm going to do it, I need to get moving. I'm tired. And probably dehydrated, cranky. Keep drinking. I've got laundry in the truck from yesterday. I didn't end up doing laundry because I was like, there's no freaking way. As it was, I didn't even get out of town. I'm like, no, there's no way I can drive. So I pulled off, and I probably slept for an hour and a half, thereabouts, or two. I just sat in the driver's seat and fell asleep. I didn't even try to get comfortable or anything like that. I had a pillow, so I put it on the center console and kind of rolled over and just crashed. Then I didn't really have any snacks left, so I stopped at the same Shell station that I was at a couple nights ago, waiting for my tow truck that never showed up. So, I knew they had a nice store, so I pulled in there and got some chips and that Coke and Gatorade. That made it a lot easier. It's like, eat something, and it helps you wake up a little bit. That got me home. I was feeling better then, so got home by 6, thereabouts.